All right, we're good. We're good, Chair. It's good to start.
Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Windsor and Ascot Development Management Committee on Thursday, the 24th of July, 2025. My name is Councillor Neil Knowles and I shall be chairing the meeting. This meeting is being held in person and via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. There are no fire drills scheduled for the evening, so if the fire alarm does sound, please leave by the nearest fire exit, which is probably just over my shoulder to the rear of the meeting room. Then make our way to the front entrance of the building opposite the barracks, where we will then review what we are going to do. Firstly, it would be useful if committee members and officers could introduce themselves so the public are aware of who is who in this meeting and the role they're undertaking. I've already introduced myself, so to my right.
Councillor Mark Wilson, Vice Chair and voting member of the panel.
Councillor Julie Teetsey, voting member of the panel.
Good evening, Councillor Karen Davis, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Sandra Luxton, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Gert Singh, voting member of the panel. I'm stepping in today for Deborah Davies. Thank you.
Lawrence Ellis, Democratic Services and clerk to this committee meeting.
Adrian Waits, Assistant Director of Planning.
Claire Pugh, Principal Planning Officer.
And joining us via the internet is Katrina Herbert, who is our legal advisor. And I think that's it, isn't it, for participants in the meeting this evening?
Yeah.
So thank you. So the public are aware that the various councillors who I not specifically asked to introduce themselves may also be attending this meeting virtually via Zoom. This, however, is in an observing capacity only, and there is no right for councillors who are not members of the committee or who have not formally registered to speak in advance to play an active role in the meeting this evening. The attendance of any councillors in this capacity shall be reflected via the member attendance records once the meeting has concluded. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I have invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if not already introduced, if appropriate. I'll also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. We will now move on and start to the agenda items. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Devon Davies and he is substituted by Councillor Gert Singh. We also received apologies from Councillor Dave Buckley. No substitute has been forwarded.
Agenda item 2, any declarations of interest with regards to the agenda items? Not there. Next item, agenda item 3, are to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of July as a true and accurate record. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Agenda item 4 then is a substantive part of the meeting, which is a full application, which is 24/02586 for the White House and land in the White House, Stag Lane, Sunningdale, Ascot, for a proposal of fire detached dwellings in 3 flats. And if I can now ask for a presentation. I will be presenting this as evening.
Very much. Yes, so the application for you is at the White House, Stag Lane, Sunningdale. So the proposal is for 5
Put your microphone close, please, sir.
That better? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, the application is for 5 detached dwellings, 3 flats, and then the retention of the existing dwelling with an extension, and then alterations to fenestration and the existing access following demolition of some existing outbuildings on site. So I'll go through the presentation, the overview, the recommendation, plans, photographs, specific mattings and conclusions and recommendations. So just to start off, the position that we are aiming to turn in the application, councillors will be aware we cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. That's recently been updated, so that's lower than it was previously. So in terms of the tilted balance, engaging, and I will set out here, this site is affected, it's within the Thames Basin SBA, so that is a protected site where you wouldn't engage the tilted balance if there was harm, but in this case, the applicants agreed to enter into a legal agreement to secure mitigation, which is quite common for development in Sunningdale and Ascot, provided that sound mitigation is in place. So with that in mind and that commitment to go into the legal agreement, we are engaging in tilted balance, which means that development should be approved unless the harms arising are significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme, taking against the policies in the NPPF as a whole. So in terms of the benefit of the scheme, so the site is allocated for housing for approximately 10 units. So this will deliver, there's 8 net new houses, and then with the existing house on site, that's 9 dwellings. So it will make a contribution to the 5-year housing land supply. There'll also be an affordable housing contribution off-site. The site is within a sustainable location. Also, given that it's an allocated site, that would have been selected for that reason also. The scheme will be net carbon zero, which is a significant benefit of the scheme. In terms of the harms, so in terms of the housing mix, as I'll go through the presentation, it doesn't entirely accord with the policy HO2 of the local plan. It's over providing on the 4+ bedroom houses. However, it is providing an apartment building with a 1 and a 2 and 3 bedroom flat. So it does go to some way meeting the needs of the population. And in terms of the character, which I'll come on to further on in the presentation. So as you'll see the plans, we'll talk through them. 5 of the proposed dwellings are quite significant in scale. And a part of that is because it's a sloping site. So in addressing the levels and the way you build it, that's what sort of adding that scale and that. And I can talk through the character of the areas we go through just to talk about the level of harm. And then in terms of trees, so the site is covered by a tree preservation order. So as you'd imagine, the trees more centrally within the site are proposed to be removed to accommodate the development, which I think probably for an allocated site of 10 units you would expect. Most of the trees on the boundary are being retained, but there's some harm, well, in terms of the access being widened and then goes into an RPA of the tree and the proximity with the of the tree. There's that sort of relationship, but overall it's quite limited harm. But I'll go through the presentation, perhaps that will become more clear. But in terms of the balance, the harms are considered by officers to be limited in nature. So if you apply the tilted balance, there's that presumption to approve. So this is just the site location plan showing, you can see the White House, and it's quite a big garden area to the house we've got, the sloping sites. And then this is the proposed layout. So you can see to the sort of the northern part, you've got the 4 detached dwellings, and then the house to the southern part is the White House, which is the existing dwelling, which is to be extended. To the north of that, the White House, there's the apartment building with 3 flats, and then plot 5 is just sort of the northeast of the site. And I just thought it'd be useful to bring up, there was a previous application that was reviewed on this site, which was determined under the black balance. It was under the 21 framework when the council was in a position they could demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. So in that case, the harms arising, were sort of assessed against the development plan, and there was conflict. So and I can go through the changes, but in terms of the dwellings to the north, plots 1 to 4, so they have been reduced in scale and mass by breaking up the massing and bringing the sort of 2-story element in a bit closer in and more gaps. But ultimately, the biggest change will be the retention of the White House, but then the apartment building to the north of that proposed, whereas before it was a larger garden area to that house. So the access up to the site, so Stag Lane, which is highlighted on the plan, it's about 4 metres wide at the moment. So in terms of this scheme, we'll widen this road and provide a footway up to the site. So it's included in the red line. Certificate B has been served on the owners of that. So it's a condition to secure that widening of the access before occupation of the development. So I'll just run through some of the elevations. So these ones are plots 1 to 4 towards the sort of northern part of the site. So you can see the front elevation, quite a typical sort of 2-story house, but it's the levels then at the back. You can see that's quite where the scale and the height comes from to the rear. Plot 2, and then plot 3. Sort of similar design approach, but I think from the previous scheme, it's just the scale of massing of the roof form and the setdowns to break up that massing, and the size of the ground roofs have been reduced. And this is plot 4. Sorry. And then plot 5, which is the 5-bedroom house proposed. As you can see again, this is with the sloping nature of the site, so you get that sort of taller front elevation, but at the back it's more typical 2-story. And then this is the existing dwelling, the White House. So the bits greyed out is the existing dwelling, and you can see the bit marked sort of shaded white is the 2-story extension. But that stays a 5-bedroom house, just making more space. And then this is the apartment building with the 3 flats in, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom flats. And as I said, the sloping site sloping. So in terms of level changes, I mean, the way the dwellings are, it's working with the slope. There are going to be changes to levels to accommodate that, and that varies across the site. It's sort of a few metres in some parts. And you can see the greyed out building is on the site next door to the south, just to show you that relationship. And then these are the section drawings. So you can see through the centre of the site, sort of going horizontal, section CC. This is the view of the 4 dwellings looking onto the front elevations from that internal access. And then I just thought it was helpful to have a section drawing from the last scheme that was reviewed, so you can see that there are differences. These ones were not as broken up in scale and mass. So I just go back. They have it's had to do now breaking the root wall of the massing. So section D, which is running through plot 1. So again, this is just showing the level changes. The dotted line is where the existing ground level is, and where it's going to be lowered out to do the sort of the lower ground level. And then section E runs, that's showing plot 4, and the red dotted line indicates number 9 Abbeywood, which is beyond that to the northeast. And then you can see plot 5, which is next to it, and on the section, I mean, it looks closer, but the section line is not drawn straight, but that just shows you that dwelling is at a higher level, but they are taking the ground down quite a lot from the existing level. And then I've just got the tree constraints plan up. So you can see a lot of the tree and vegetation is coming out within this sort of main part of the site to accommodate the development. And also for the widening of the footway up the site. Trees are removed there because that needs to be done to provide the road widening of the footway. The trees and a particular sort of concern in the previous refusal, I think what the focus was on was T35, which is a B category tree. So that's labelled. The building doesn't actually incur into the root protection area, so it's close, but in terms of the harm, because it's not making a direct incursion to the RPA, it's not considered to be a significant harm. And then the T4 tree, which is where the road widening is in, with North Lodge, that's shown to be retained, and that because of the level of incursion into the root protection area of that tree, the council tree officer advised that's probably not going to survive long term. But it's a balance in terms of what the site reformer required was to have a improved access, a pedestrian footway. So it's that trade-off. So I think because it provides that the widening of the footway, that sort of that harm, that impact is considered to be limited to the balance. So then I've just included some photographs from the site. So standing within the southern part of the site looking north, you can see the trees and vegetation in buildings beyond. This is the existing rear elevation of the White House, which is to be retained and extended. And then this is standing sort of north of the site, looking towards the White House beyond, and then you can see the trees and vegetation, which would be removed to accommodate the development. And then this is standing within the site, looking to the properties at Abbey Wood, to the northeast of the site. So you can sort of see they are quite modest 2-story dwellings and the neighbour of the site. So if you're looking at the site plan, that's sort of next to plot 4 on the site plan. And then this is just another photograph, and you can see Fairways House beyond the trees, which are shown to be retained within the site. And then another view from the northern part of the site, looking towards 9 Abbey Wood. You can see that building is quite an open site, it's quite visible. And then just another photograph, so you can see the shrubs along there. They would be removed to accommodate the development. And then in terms of the character, which I think is probably sort of quite important to consider when sort of thinking about the level of harm. So this is Holcombe House Gardens, which is I've done a sort of extract the site plan. It says it's opposite the site basically. It's a relatively recent development that's got houses that some have some crown roofs, but that's the sort of the appearance of them. This is Fairways House, which is to the front of the site, fronting London Road. So you can see quite a large building. And then Sunningdale Heights, which is I think it was granted permission in around 2014 on appeal. But again, you've got an apartment building in there and some quite substantial houses, which work with a sloping site. So a sort of similar arrangement with the elevations. And then this is the existing Stag lane, which is to be widened. So that vegetation on the side would have to come out to widen the road and put the footway in. I mean, what I would say as well is there will be new tree planting and landscaping on site, which partly for the character, but partly as well for achieving the biodiversity net gain. And then just a view from London Road looking up. And you can see the tree where on the boundary where the road will be widened and that incursion into the RPA, and then the outbuilding will be obviously demolished as shown on the site plan to allow that widening. So I think I just wanted to pick up on the previous refused application, because obviously that is a material consideration for the determination of this application. So that was for 6 dwellings, and that was refused under, as I said, flat balance, because it was in a different framework, different time of the position of the wider housing land supply. So one of the reasons was the inefficient use of land, because it was now allocated site for approximately 10, it was going to deliver 6. But so now this has come up to 9, it's not hitting 10, but it's one below, so I think that reason is overcome. The bins demonstrate the schemes being designed to adapt and mitigate climate change. So the energy statement's being submitted, reviewed by the sustainability officer, who's confirmed it would be net zero carbon. So that would be one of the provisions secured in the legal agreement. And then failure to deliver affordable housing. So a viability assessment was submitted with this application, which was independently reviewed by a consultant for the council. So it can't deliver the 30% on site. That's not viable. But what is viable to deliver in the view of the independent consultant was the £57,000. So that would obviously be an off-site contribution. But that will be secured through the legal agreement, and also what the applicants agreed to have are early and late stage review mechanisms as well. So then you'll get with the late stage the actual build costs to actually test what the viability, what delivered the scheme. And then the housing mix. So on the last scheme, that was I think all 4+ bedroom houses. So it's not saying that's a complete no harm. It's not entirely in accordance with our policy, but it does provide a better mix. So for that reason, it's given limited harm because it does go some way to meeting the various population needs. The cramped layout, scale and external appearance and the character of the area was a harm on the last application. So I think you would have seen the photographs of the other sites, and I think in the agenda pack I included some elevations of Sunningdale Heights. So I think there is a bit of a mixed character around there. I know the dwellings on Abbey Wood, they are quite sort of modest 2-storey houses with pitched roofs, quite not very bulky, but then you have got Sunningdale Heights, which has got quite large buildings, crown roofs. There are crown roofs in the area and quite large buildings. So for that reason, and because of where the site is, so when you perceive the scale and bulk of the buildings is quite limited. For that reason, it's given limited harm. And then the trees, which I sort of explained, there will be some harm. As I say, the main probably one is the one with the road widening, that level of incursion into the RPA. But that's balanced. If you don't make that incursion, how you deliver the widening of the footway. So in the rounds, it's considered to be limited as a harm. The ecology survey has been submitted, and the ecologist is satisfied with them subject to conditions. And the biodiversity net gain, so in part will be delivered on site with new tree planting. That will be secured through the legal agreement, but then also as a mandatory requirement to do the 10%, so there will be some off-site. But that's covered under legislation as well. And then the Thames Basin Heaths SBA was on the last one, and which I think because the legal agreement wasn't secured, so it was you obviously got a reason for refusal if that legal agreement's not secured. So the legal agreement in this case is not been completed yet, but it's under the process of being so in terms of the benefits of the scheme, I'll just go on to the table actually, because that just sets out the weight given and might just set it more clearly. The delivery of 8 net dwellings is given significant weight as a benefit. The fact that it's on an allocated housing site within a sustainable location is given significant weight as a benefit. The delivery of development being net zero carbon is given significant weight as a benefit. The affordable housing contribution of £58,000 is a benefit, but given of what that could actually deliver, it wouldn't deliver an entire house, so that's quite limited weight as a benefit. And then you've got the economic benefits during construction and operational periods. And given the size of the development, it's not a major development. That's given moderate weight in the balance. And then the harms for the reason set out the officers are giving. The character of the area from the scale and mass of the buildings is given limited weight. The mix not according with policy is given limited weight. And then the harm to the trees, considering it is an allocated site for housing, that's given limited weight as a harm. So in balancing that, as I say, the harms are considered to be limited in nature, so the presumption to improve applies. Sorry, I was going to say there is an update report. So that's just summarising that there are more objections received to the scheme. But perhaps the main sort of thing in that update is about the road during the construction period. So the condition in the committee report at condition 10 talks about prior to occupation of the development. And I know it's a local concern about the width of the road being able to take construction vehicles. So there's now a condition which has been agreed with the agent to secure details of the access, which will be 4.8 metres wide. So there'll be a widening of the access for the construction phase. It won't be the final version of what comes prior to the occupation of the development, because if you're putting all the sort of the final surfacing down the footway and then construction vehicles are going up, that's going to cause damage. So the condition would ensure the width of the access on Stag Lane would be 4.8 metres, and we get details of the materials, etc. And then it would apply for the construction period to allow just to avoid any conflict between vehicles and construction vehicles. And I think those are the main things.
Thank you very much for that. We have some speakers for this evening. The first speaker will be Public Representative Michael Bowe. If you'd like to step forward. If we've not done this before, the microphone has a button at the base. There you go. And 3 minutes to speak. We'll start counting from when you're composed and ready to speak. And you'll get a 1 minute warning from Owen as well. Sorry, Lawrence, number towards the end. So you all look similar, these Democratic officers. Okay, as soon as you're ready. Sir.
The site is on a hill resembling a ski slope, with a 13-metre difference between the top and the bottom, accessed via a narrow single-lane road. It is in the Borough Local Plan as AL34. Rather than being demolished, the White House remains and occupies 30% of the site. All new properties are forced around it. The proposed huge houses dominate adjoining properties and do not accord with policy HO2. The problems are: 1. Plot 5 at the top of the hill is a massive 4-storey house with 11 windows at the front. Its roof height will be 14 metres higher than the ground floor of adjacent 9 Abbey Wood, just 19 metres away. However, RBWM comments that plot 5 will not be unduly overbearing on the house or its garden. 2. Plot 4. It is 2.5 metres from 9 Abbey Wood to the boundary, and then just 3 metres to the proposed 14-metre high plot 4 house directly to the southeast. From midday onwards, and especially in winter, sunlight will be blocked from 9 Abbey Wood. Basement construction requires 4 metres of excavation, just 3 metres from the boundary. RBWM sidestep this and state that excavation is a matter for the owner-developer, and that plot 4 will not have an overbearing impact on the amenity space of 9 Abbey Wood. 3. Access. The first 40 metres of Stag Lane is 4 metres wide. There is no footpath. Fine when there was just the White House, but now the lane, which is unlit, also provides the sole pedestrian
1 minute remaining
and vehicle access route to Sunningdale, the Holcombe House Gardens, Sunningdale Heights and the White House, a total of 18 properties. To meet highway standards, widening the lane to 4.8 metres with a 2-metre footpath is approved, but RBWM state that this only takes place after construction. Residents are annoyed and request on safety grounds that a condition be put onto any approval. Widening the lane be carried out before construction. Otherwise, for 2 years, residents risk accidents with works vehicles. All this controversy could be avoided. Smaller houses, better positioned on the site, as outlined on AL34, and an access road widened before construction. Councillors have a choice to concur with RBWM conclusions or honour the legacy of Sir John Betjeman and support the residents whose arguments are both logical
That's 3
and
minutes.
sensible.
Thank you, sir. If we quickly move on to Before we move on to the second speaker, I'd like officers to address a couple of the issues. What about the boundaries and distances, Claire, if we can, quickly there? They've looked into it, saves us going back into it later. So if you could quickly address that.
Yeah, of course. I'll share my screen actually. It'll be helpful just to look at the layouts. I'll go back to the site plan. I suppose as well, just to point out the previous application that wasn't refused onto residential amenity. So as I've said there, you've got to take that into account as a material consideration, but just go back to the site.
I think it's more the height of the building and the distance about.
Yes.
Particularly plot 5.
Plot 5. So yes, in the committee report, it's at paragraph 10.37 to 10.38. So actually, plot 5, it talks about so the plot 5 is a circa 21 metres away from the rear elevation of 9 Abbey Wood. So I think in terms of separation distances, and bearing in mind this isn't a direct facing relationship, it is at an angle. 21 metres would be considered sufficient as a distance quite significant. Certainly not one I would advocate recommending refusal on that distance.
It's just to get clarification straight away rather than wait till later. Our next speaker is from the Parish Councillor, Councillor Lily Evans from Sunningdale Parish Council. Hello, Councillor, and normal rules apply. I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Thank you. And good evening, councillors. I represent Sunningdale Parish Council Planning Committee. We have made our representation to the Borough Council on the application that was provided in December. And we can see that that application has been amended several times. So there are 3 other changes that have occurred since, and MPPF has been changed in December. So I'm afraid some of the strength of our argument has sort of been taken off as a result. So I have 3 main points to make. One is that you start in the report here that our neighbourhood plan doesn't have the same strength as the borough local plan because it was agreed before the borough local plan. While that is the case, I would just like to let everybody know that we are currently in the process of refreshing our neighbourhood plan so that hopefully it will be not just aligned with the current borough local plan, but be aligned with the planned refresh of the borough local plan, so that would go away. And the problem with that one is that you consider HO2 being a moderate harm. Unfortunately, this is part of a significant definition of the townscape in Sunningdale. And therefore, this is far from being a moderate harm. Instead of having the low density housing, this is not just medium density, this is high density housing of 325 square meters on 140 square meters plot. By any standard, that is not enough. The second one is I would suggest that more attention is paid to SUDs and how is that handled, because while at the moment in the garden there is no flooding, once you have got so much of the concrete around, that is a different thing under the current large rains that we have in the area. And finally, I would just like to say that we totally agree about the use of the road and particularly the residents in the Sunningdale Heights, who are a lot of them elderly and need to use that pavement, especially because the highways have calculated very unreasonable number of movements. If you have got 8 houses, of which 5 have got 5+ bedrooms, and only
That's 3 minutes, Chair.
movements, that is not.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. It's true to say, I think that some of the approaches you said in the initial objection must have been taken into account by officers as they went through and screened things out there. I think we can move to those points we can address, the members can address as we move through it. And from the applicant, we have Paul Dickinson. Same rules apply, Paul. Once you press a button and start speaking in 3 minutes, there'll be a 1 minute before the end warning.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to just make some brief comments on 4 points: scale, neighbour amenity, housing mix, and land stability. Scale, I'm delighted you had an opportunity to see the drawings that Claire Pugh has shown you. We were concerned about references to 3-storey development, and we just want to make it clear that it's not 3 stories. These are 2-storey houses, but because the ground falls away at the back of them, you've then got a semi-basement underneath. So in a sense, that becomes 3 stories, but it's not a full 3-storey house, and I'm pleased you've been able to see that. It's exactly the same arrangement that you've got at Sunningdale Heights, as Claire said. On neighbour amenity, as has been pointed out, that was not a reason for refusal on the first application. Members will be aware of the need for consistency in decision making, but we have sought to address some of the comments from the neighbours, particularly in terms of the relationship with between plot 4 and number 9 Abbey Wood, and we provided additional information based on topographical surveys to confirm that the actual height of the ground level of plot 4 and broadly the height, the ridge height of plot 4 is very similar to number 9 Abbey Wood. And as I say, that's confirmed by surveyed levels. The neighbour did suggest that plot 4 was only 2 or 3 metres from the nearest point at number 9. As Claire has pointed out, it's in fact 8 metres between the 2 properties at its nearest point. And she's also pointed out that in respect to the concern on plot 5, that plot 5 is some 21 metres. In fact, I'm making nearly 22 metres away from number 9 at its nearest point. And it's also angled away. So in fact, plot 5 is more looking into the middle of the development site rather than towards the boundaries of number 9. In terms of housing mix, this is a mix of 1, 2 and 3 and mainly 4-bed dwellings. But I wouldn't want members to think this isn't meeting local needs, because the council's latest housing needs assessment shows that some 1/3 of your need is for 4-bed or more.
One minute remaining.
And it's only 1/4 of the dwellings should be for smaller 1 and 2 bedrooms. So the policy sets a borough-wide target, but obviously it's not achievable necessarily in each individual development to accommodate that mix. The important thing here is that the mix reflects the predominant dwelling type in the neighbouring area, which is clearly larger detached family houses. Finally, on land stability, again, not a reason for refusal on the previous application. National advice says that land stability could be a relevant planning consideration where land may be unstable. There is no evidence here that the land is unstable, nothing in the council records, nothing from objectors. The landowner has lived there for 40 years, he points out. This is not made up land or field land, this is natural ground. The levels are between 1 in 12 and 1 in 13. Nothing unusual, particularly in that area. All those other developments around us have dealt with exactly the same situation. So there's nothing unusual or difficult to deal with in terms of levels. The only other thing I would say is another benefit is the
That's 3 minutes.
highway and pedestrian benefit of producing a footway, which of course everybody else will be able to use along the lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. It's worth just reminding everybody that the previous application was on flat balance, and since then the regulations have changed quite considerably to bring in tilted balance as the driver behind this. So it's difficult to compare like and like here, because the planning framework has changed slightly now as well. So if we can then move on to the first part of the members' piece of the evening. Remember, we split into questions for the officers first, So if you can sort of hold your opinions until we debate a bit later to make it a bit sharper, and just keep the questions relevant and with repetition. If we could have the first councillor who wishes to speak. People are still making notes here, I think. Councillor Sano.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for the officers. He said the legal agreement has not been yet finalized. So if it's still not finalized and your recommendation is for it for approval, how does it work? How is it met later on? When you will be able, supposing if anybody's minded you to sort of pass the application tonight. Thank you.
Claire.
Thank you. So the permission can't be granted without the completion of the legal agreement. So it would be only once that legal agreement is completed and secures what's outlined, and then we'll secure for infrastructure for the system net zero carbon, the affordable housing contribution, and the SBA litigation. So yes, the permission will only be issued provided committee resolves to grant it once that legal agreement is completed.
Sorry, I didn't understand that yet. I know what you're saying, but it's still not very clear to me because if we are minded to grant the permission and the legal document is not complete, who makes the decision?
Sorry, in the committee report, it's got the two options. So you've got to grant permission on completion of the undertakings for infrastructure in section 10 of the report and the condition. So what happens is the legal team will draft the legal agreement, and once that's all okayed by officers in terms of it securing the right things and set out in this committee report, legal will then complete on it. Planning will get notified when that is completed, and once that has been done, then we can issue a decision. That's the normal process for planning application. What happens with legal?
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I just had one question on the housing type and mix. Got that come from the SMART 2016, but I just wanted to ask you: do we have like a running total, like where we sit with the housing need, and is that are those figures still relevant? Because obviously we've got loads of development in other areas where they're sort of hitting different numbers.
So we monitor housing provision through the annual monitoring report. We've literally a few weeks ago published the 23-24. Sorry, they take quite a while to complete because you have to get lots of completion data from developers. So we've literally just published the one for 23-24, and we're working on the 24-25. So we monitor it through that. But I mean, in general, there are different areas of the borough and different characters. So you don't expect every development to exactly match the mix that you set out in SMART, because obviously you have areas like town centres where you're likely to see more flatted developments, and you have areas that are more rural where you're more likely to see family houses. So remember, I don't have figures here in front of me. I couldn't say, we're 100% on target to meet a particular mix tonight, but that's where those figures are if members want to look them up. I think for this development, we think it's a reasonable mix for the character of the area. You wouldn't expect to see a highly flatted scheme in this area, I don't think. I think larger dwellings is probably the way to go.
Thank you.
Any more? Councillor Julian Chissing.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, yes, I've just got a few questions. Hopefully not too difficult. Can I just clarify one of the speakers, for the first speaker, I think the privacy has been dealt with, that I'm satisfied on that. But there was a suggestion, and that from I think Mr. Bow and also from Councillor Evans, about widening the lane before completion And looking down, I see condition 10. Can we just clarify that? Does that meet exactly that? Does that, am I reading that correctly? That actually that is a condition, so applied to the identifying the first occupation, the widening shall be undertaken. That looks reasonable. I'm just trying to think timeline here.
No problem. Yeah, so it was in the committee update report. So you're right, the condition that's in the committee report is about the widening and the footway that's going to be provided prior to the first occupation of the development. But for the concerns over large construction vehicles using that lane, there's the additional condition recommended in the update report, which is a prior to commencement condition that will get plans and details of and surfacing materials, showing a scheme to widen Stag lane to 4.8 metres. For the purposes of the construction phase, we've come for approval to the local planning authority. We consult with highways, and then that access, if you like, the temporary access, it will be the final one that will be built out for occupation, but that will be in place for the duration of the construction period. So it's sort of in between measure, so you're getting the width increased, but it's not the final sort of access.
Thank you. I must admit, I know the update was sent earlier today, but I haven't looked at that. So thank you for that. That's useful clarification. Another question. I think on flooding, I'm satisfied because of condition 2, and also sorry, that was more a comment. Can I ask about the trees? In particular, the 2 trees. So there's T4, which is by the road. I think T35, which was, it seemed there's a route one. Now, I think, can we just clarify what's likely to happen to those trees? I think T4, the one by the road at the entrance, it sounded like that was going to go, or was it going to go? And then T35, it sounds like that might still be there, but there might be damage to the roots. Is that fair?
So I think so. The T4, which is the one where the road widening is taking place, it's shown for retention. But the advice of the council's tree officer is that probably long term, with that level of incursion into the root protection area of that tree, it probably won't survive or will need to be removed. That's the advice from the council's tree officer. So the other tree, T35, it's not within the root protection area, but the building is very close. So it's, it's always difficult. I would say it would be a stronger harm if it was within the root protection area making an incursion. So I think probably the T4 is the one that will be most impacted.
Okay, fine. Okay, I'm happy with that. I mean, there's a balance, isn't there? I had one more question. Where was it? Yeah. Can I just ask about this? I wasn't quite sure I understood the. Oh, by the way, it's very, very helpful. That sort of here's the differences at that page. Very, very helpful. Just saying here's the differences between things, but I won't ask that question. The Thames Basin SPA. That's been apparently mitigated by some sort of legal agreement, but I couldn't quite understand that. How can you mitigate damage to? Is it that they have agreed to take other mitigations to lessen the harm? Are they paying money? I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah. So in terms of the mitigation, it can vary depending on the scheme, and there's different suitable alternative green spaces that can be used as mitigation. But for this site, it's been agreed that the remaining capacity at Allensfield Sang can be used to mitigate, so there'll be the financial contribution towards Sang and Sang that will be secured through the agreement on the mitigation.
Okay, no further questions.
Councillor Karen Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I know that it says that it's not a planning consideration, so I just wanted to double check on this mention of this drain that in it's number 10 in the list on page 18, the list of content representations. This one, this flight of there that there's sort of 2 metre gap in which there's a major drain running from the nursing home to the A30. It says it's not a planning consideration. At what stage is this? These matters dealt with? Because obviously, like quite a major thing.
Adrian?
Yeah, so drainage and impacts such as that aren't dealt with at the planning stage, but at the construction stage and under the building regulations, etc., then the relevant tests have to be carried out. So there would be checks to make sure that drains weren't being built over without the appropriate build over agreements, or that drains were relocated. So it's something we don't get involved in at the planning stage, but at the actual build stage of the development, then the developer has a responsibility, and the building control stage of things has a responsibility to make sure those issues are sorted out properly. So that's why we don't have to worry about them in dealing with the planning application, because they're covered off later under separate legislation.
So that's something that would be picked up by building control.
Any more questions from panel members? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions actually. The first, it would be interesting just to hear a kind of a layman's explanation of how this is net carbon zero, because I can't quite get my head around that. I'm also looking at the VLP, and it seems like a lot of the points that were put in the VLP have not been met by this scheme. And I'd just like to understand, I guess, how we reconcile that. It feels like there's a lot of, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to steer into the debate, but it feels like there's a lot of negatives, some of which, we're not meeting what it says in the VLP. And there's things like, the use of crown roofs is not desirable. The housing mix isn't there. There's no affordable housing. 58,000 doesn't really do very much, as you said. The BNG on the site is negative, so I'd be interested to understand what is the nature of the off-site mitigation that turns it positive. And finally, how significant is 8 houses to the housing supply, which I think the latest number is 4.0 something, if I remember right. What difference would 8 make to that? Thank you.
Okay, Glenn.
If I start with the second thing you had about site performer and the local plan, and just go through sort of the criteria of that. So obviously, the local plan was adopted in 2022. I don't want to keep talking about the national planning policy framework, but that is a material consideration, significant weight, and I think potentially, and probably where you got the refusal on the previous scheme, is that tilted balance wasn't being engaged. But just to run through the requirements, that's at 10.3. It's set out in the committee report. So to retain higher valuable category trees where possible, particularly those that reinforce the character area at the site boundaries. And I think there are some tree removal on boundaries with the sort of the widening of the road and the footway, but largely the other trees are to be retained on the boundaries. There's quite a lot coming out in the centre of the site, but I don't see how you could get 10 units on there with that similar number without tree removal. Implement new tree planting in and around the site where appropriate. There's a condition to secure the hard and soft landscaping, but there's already been indicated new tree planting, so I think that there's ample space on site to get that. Provide the biodiversity net gain. So obviously now there's the mandatory net gain under legislation, which is the 10%, which that came after this policy, but I think unless you've got a very big site, it's quite hard to do on-site delivery of 10%. And actually, most sites have to use purchasing units to make up the 10%. So this will do a combination of on-site tree planting, and that's where the legal agreement comes in to secure the monitoring on-site. But that won't make up the full 10%. but it comes under the legislation that deals with net gain. They have to meet the 10%, which is a legal requirement, and that will come, I imagine, through the purchasing of units to make up to the 10%. So a mixture of both. Make improvements to the vehicular access from London Road, provide safe access to site pedestrians, cyclists, as well as motorists. I think the proposal to widen Stagway and put the footway on does meet that. The high quality design supports the carriage function of the area and has regard to the topography of the site. So, I mean, you know, the design, it's subjective, but then you also have to be mindful of what is in the character of the area. So when I say parameters aren't desirable, generally they do add to the scale and bulk of a building, but you also have to look at what's around there. So I'm not saying that the whole area is characterised by large buildings with grand roofs, but that does exist in the area. So you can't just, the Sunningdale Heights is quite, you know, sort of a key example of that. And actually the density is appropriate. It's less than the other sites up that road, and it's in line with what the approximate number for that allocation requires. The appearance of them is acceptable. So, and I think with a sloping site like this, it is quite difficult. You know, you will get that change in level in the way they're designed to address that. So it's having regard to the scale and mass of buildings that do exist in the area, that's why it's considered to be a limited harm. The appropriate mitigations for noise and air quality, there's a condition on that, the new dwellings, to secure details of noise insulation and ventilation. I mean, the provision of 30% affordable housing, what I will say, and obviously the viability assessment, which has been independently reviewed. And I did ask the assessor about, you know, obviously the plan asked for 30%, but I think it's a sort of combination. Times have moved on since the local plan was drawn up, and viability, build costs have gone up, a lot of costs have gone up and things. So unfortunately I can't meet that, but you know, we've had that independently reviewed. Viability is quite technical. That's why we employ those experts. But it is providing what is viable, which is the on-site contribution. The SUDS, there's a condition to secure that the legal flood authority don't reject the scheme, and then the mitigation of the Thames Basin Heath special protection area. As I say, that will be secured in the legal agreement. So it doesn't, as you say, comply with entirely every single part of that performer, but yeah, I think some things have moved on, like this sort of viability situation when what was tested as diabolical back then. And you can't just look at that in isolation, as I say, it has to have regard to the latest national planning policy framework. I might ask.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. No, that is very helpful. Can I just come back on a couple of points? The first one, the tree protection. Sorry, this is a new point. The tree protection orders. It feels like that counts for absolutely nothing here. I don't know. That's almost a comment, but it's almost like, what's the point of a tree protection order if this, you know, they just get taken down at the first opportunity? It almost seems like. And then secondly, can we secure the purchasing of the BNG units off site? Is that part of the conditional or legal agreement?
Yes. So there is a condition. It is actually covered under legislation. They have to do it anyway. But get to the right condition. So it's condition 70, which will secure the biodiversity net gain plan. So that will sort of cover all that detail for approval.
And sorry, the TPO point. How?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, the tree preservation order, I don't know if the date it was put on, but I mean, this site was allocated through the local plan process for housing. You know, that you've got to balance up when you allocate a site for development. There will be an element of tree removal. So I get your point. I mean, I'm not sure how the system is but
yeah, I mean, I think when you think about tree preservation orders, you have to think about them much like other things we put in place, like Article 4. So a tree preservation order is placed on a tree or a group of trees to recognise that those trees have a particular amenity value and deserve an added level of protection to stop people from being able to undertake works to them or fell them without gaining the relevant consents. But in a planning application balance or in a local plan balance, which is what was done here, that doesn't mean that it's not a sacrosanct thing. You don't put a tree preservation order on a tree and then that means that nothing can ever be done to the tree. It adds an extra level of protection to the tree, recognising that the tree or group of trees has an amenity value. When you come to considering a planning application, you still have to do your weighing exercise of the beneficial value of those trees that might be lost versus the other benefits of the scheme. So it's there to provide an extra level of protection. When we get a planning application, we still have to balance the harm of the loss of the trees against other benefits of the scheme.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry, a couple of other points. I think my very first question was around sort of like a layman's explanation of how this is carbon net zero. I don't know if you could sort of try and cover that. Appreciate it's a bit complicated.
I'll cover that one off, probably without reference to any detail, but the way our SPD for sustainability works is we set an ambition that developments should aim to be net zero in terms of regulated emissions. So that would be that they aim to design the building so that the regulated emissions are effectively offset by renewable energy generation on site. And then we have a provision that where developments can't quite get there, the difference can be offset by a contribution to the carbon offset fund in the borough, which then provides money to the council, which it uses to provide additional generation in the borough, etc. So this development has quite substantial. It's got air source heat pumps, high level of insulation, and solar PV proposed, which all really bring down the emissions. And then the legal agreement would secure that if there were any emissions left after all that's done, that appropriate payment would be made. So that's how it works in principle.
Right, so it's looking at the scheme once it is completed and running. It's not. It doesn't look at the actual development of the scheme and what might be involved there.
It's talking about the operational emissions, the regulated emissions arising from the occupation and the use of the dwellings. It's not saying there is no carbon embodied in the building of these buildings. Yeah.
And sorry, final point. The VLP refers to 10 residential units. As I think one of the public speakers mentioned, you could put 10 smaller residential units on here and tick many boxes, including keeping trees. Do we have any ability to kind of actually hold or to kind of move in that direction? Clearly, the developer wants to build the bigger houses, the better in terms of the numbers, but a VLP says 10 residential units, that could be 10 2-beds or 10 6-beds. There's a great deal of difference. So is that 10 residential? Sorry, thinking about the question is when the VLP says 10 residential units, is there an inference as to how many bedrooms they will contain or how big they are?
Claire? Not from that. Obviously, the size of the bedroom comes from policy HO2 on the housing mix, which sort of picked up on. So I think it's for you as the decision takers to sort of assess the scheme in front of you and apply that balance for seasons. But yeah, it's not we can't ask for another scheme. It's all needed to come forward the applicant for this application once it's determined.
I think as well that the number of properties, 10 in the BLP. It came down to an argument we had a while back about the appropriate use of land, but we're changing is that an issue there? I know tilted balance leads towards that, but the appropriate use of land is a biggie. We, match the 10 units, it's only 2 more. But that's an issue there. Does that come out at all?
I mean, I think it's always a balance. We've got the scheme we've got before us. I mean, there are pros and cons to different things. Personally, when I look at the tree protection plan and the location of the majority of the trees that are being lost, actually, most of them are in the middle of the site or by the access road where the road's been widened, and most layouts that you try to come up with for this site, regardless of the size of the units, would probably end up with quite a few of those trees being lost, because they're not really being lost for the building blocks themselves in many cases, but for the access facilities. I think the retention of the White House is an interesting point, but there's always a balance on these things. So just in terms of some of the points that we were just touching on about embodied carbon and things like that, actually the retention of an existing building has positive benefits that we would like to see, because it doesn't involve demolishing a building, wasting materials, and then building a new one. So from that perspective, it's positive. It retains quite a large family home on the site, which is also positive. Yes, if you knocked it down and built 2 new houses, possibly you could get 2 smaller homes in the space of that one house. But it's very much a weighing up. I don't think there's a substantial difference in it in terms of you're keeping a larger house. You could potentially gain two smaller houses, but you'd also be increasing carbon emissions and losing the existing property. So I think that is just a balance that committee have to deal with as decision makers on the scheme before them.
Thank you very much. If any more questions, Councillor Jenkins.
Yes, just hopefully one very, very simple question. It might be actually for Democratic Services. When I look at the recommendation, which is on page 2 of 38, that's the one that we would be voting on one way or the other, I think. It talks about granting planning permission on satisfactory completion of an undertaking to secure the infrastructure in section 10 and conditions. Whereas when I look at the where is it? There's somewhere else. I think when I look at the panel update and somewhere else actually, it talks about the completion of a satisfactory legal agreement to secure infrastructure detailed in section 10 and conditions. So it's a satisfactory legal agreement which we've been talking about, whereas the thing that we've been voting on says an undertaking to secure the infrastructure. Is that a material difference, and do we need to change it, or are you happy that it's materially the same?
Adrian?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I think it's just a turn of phrase. So in the original officer's report, the phrase undertaking has been used. What it will have been referring to is a legal undertaking. So it would have in effect been referencing a legal agreement. I'd probably suggest we adopt the word legal agreement in the resolution, just because it covers bilateral and unilateral undertakings as well. But I don't think there's a major issue there. It's just a turn of phrase.
Okay, Lawrence, are we okay to do that?
I'll just check quickly with Katrina.
Okay.
Katrina, if we can just advise us on suggesting that legal, the difference between legal agreement and an undertaking for agreement.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
But as Adrian said, it is a turn of phrase. However, I think Section 106 planning obligation could be the phrase to use for this. We can amend the resolution to that extent, because it is well understood that an undertaking means a legal undertaking under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. and there's reference to a legal agreement as well. But what we're actually talking about in all of those phrases is a Section 106 planning obligation, which can either be unilateral, bilateral, or multilateral. So I think it would be helpful, just for clarity, if that's okay through you, Chair, on that suggestion. If members were minded to, if you're reminded to amend that resolution, that might assist.
That's sensible guidance, which should be Claire and Adrian have to take on board. If everybody has finished with their questions to officers, and one more, Councillor Lexton.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about just a clarification on this. Allensfield money, what is it is being given to Allensfield? Is it the 58,000 or that is sites? Thank you.
Sorry, the 58,000, I think you picked up about the affordable housing offsite contribution. SAM and SAM is it's a methodology that's applied based on the number of unit sizes, etc. But that money goes towards it's collected from all developments, and it goes towards the sort of maintenance and upkeep of the SAM.
Yeah. And
to keep it sort of as an alternative to encourage people to go rather than using the SBA. So that's how it works. But it'll be a different contribution.
Okay.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just another point as well. That's really handy. Obviously, the borough's getting 58,000. That's guaranteed, isn't it? Now, you said there's a early stage and late stage review. So if they make, just explain that, if they make more money on it, does that mean the borough gets more money?
Yeah, so there's different mechanisms you can get. So where you've got a scheme that's not policy compliant like this, because it's not doing 30%, you can get different mechanisms. The early stages, if they don't start within a certain time, this will be drafted under the legal agreement, then it will be reviewed again to assess the cost at that time. The late stage review comes later on in the process, and you'll get the actual build costs. That will come to us, and we would get an independent consultant to review that. So if there is any additional money and it turns out the costs weren't as estimated, then we can get them through that process.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Excellent. And when you get the consultant, who pays for that consultant? Do we have to pay for that, or would that be the developer?
Typically, it's the developer. It's normally word of the legal agreement, the cost of the applicant to cover the cost of that external review.
Thank you very much. That's very good. Thank you, Joe.
If we're complete with questions, sorry, Councillor Gowden.
Sorry, it's just one really minor point. It says that highways say they can't identify where the bicycle parking provision or the refuse provision will be located for the property. I noticed there's a condition for the cycle parking. Is there a condition for the refuse? It seems very minor, but it's sort of one of those niggly things that's important.
I think, sorry, just for the highways comments, there were a few sets of comments that would have come from their first set, which plans are updated to show the cycle storage for the dwellings. Let me just check on storage.
There's quite a few different iterations, and with the old plan and new one, it's quite difficult to sort of keep up with which is the most up to date.
It's not in condition, the refuse storage. So
Which one that was? Legalised paradise. You can't remember other things.
I suppose typically it would be more with the apartment building. I mean, private dwellings would normally have it within their curtilage.
I'd suggest we just add an additional condition requiring details of refuse storage to be submitted. As Claire says, it will probably be some kind of storage facility for the apartments, and I can envisage most of the properties will simply have an area where they put their bins, but it's probably easiest if members just note that they'd like an additional condition added and leave it to us as officers to word that outside of the meeting.
Yes.
That would be great.
Okay, so the sneezing fit there. If we've completed the questioning part, can I thank officers for a really concise presentation there? Answered a lot of questions, and also obviously part of the process you've obviously taken into account the consultation, which is I think is laudable as well, and addressed a lot of the points. If we can open the floor now to councillors to discuss and debate it, please. Who would like to go first? Councillor first.
Thank you, Chair. I was just a bit surprised that nobody was offered a site visit.
We're supposed to be debating now. I had to give
Oh,
all
sorry,
questions.
I know, but it would
They
be
just
nice to have.
Yeah, I think we've got someone else that comes to ask it. So.
Sorry, missed that one. Yeah.
Anyone to start? Councillor first.
Thank you, Chair. I can start off with some thoughts. Claire, would you be able to pull up the planning balance slide? Then that's quite helpful to sort of help think about things. I guess my first thoughts, there's obviously a lot of technically non-policy compliant aspects with this, but it does feel like the provision of housing kind of overrules so much of that. I think just thinking about this, the 8 net dwellings, yes, there's significant weight, but it's not going to make a huge difference. But it is 8 dwellings out of our target of 10. Plus the existing one. The allocated site, for me, this is the most significant thing. It's very clear the impact of the last BLP. If this wasn't an allocated site, it wouldn't be happening, and that's it. So we're very much tied by that BLP. The carbon we've had explained, I'm not sure that's significant weight really now, and then the affordable housing. For me, 58k is a token gesture. I suspect if costs go up, that might even get wiped out. But hopefully we'll be able to get that. And the economic benefits, I think that's sort of fairly modest. For me, the harms are quite a lot bigger. So for me, that slide suggests that it's quite heavily weighted. For me, it's much closer. And there's sort of like possibly 1 point in it. I won't go through my scoring, but I'm kind of downgrading some of the left and upgrading some of the right. I think it ends up being quite close. I'll leave it there now.
Next, if anybody, if not, I'll have a little go. I like to think it's always worth remembering when the BLP was in the examination phase, that when these sites were allocated, the fact they did have trees in them was taken into account, if you remember. And it's a case of I hate any tree which is taken down for no reason, but back when the BLP was done, it was something we all discussed, if you remember, the amount of trees that would be harmed across the borough with some of these sites, particularly over towards Mainhead. But the other problem with these smaller sites, and it's particularly in the Ascot, Sunningdale area, isn't it, that none of them, the financial benefit or mix of the developer, because it's a business after all, supports providing more, affordable housing on site, because it's just the market doesn't match it. So I always bear that in mind. And this really, the grounds of developments is small to sort of very the bottom end of the medium scale developments, and it certainly applies there. The scale character area for scale and mass. Again, as Councillor Wilson said, the BLP is the sword that fell on this, by taking a nice little piece of land and creating an infill. So my hands are tied to a certain degree by those kind of things, and I think really it's one thing or the other. As was said there, if we squeeze more houses in there, it would affect the carbon neutral side, the balance of the property, and more the harm to the character of the area scale. So I think really the balance there, the tilted balance, I'm of the opinion that perhaps even if we didn't have tilted balance, if it was a flat balance, it would probably lean towards approval anyway, to be honest with you. So that's my feelings at the moment on that. Councillor Gertsen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a good report, Claire. This is very good. Bit boring for me because normally I like to argue with the officer, but there's not much arguing on this one. But I like the first thing I sort of look at when I look at the planning and go into the detail is a sustainability officer. What does our sustainability officer have to say about this? Sustainability officer is happy. It's in line with the sustainability SPD document, which is important for us. I did have a look at the crown roof. Did concern me. I mean, I'm not overly keen on crown roofs, but within the planning application documentation, I don't know if you can bring that image there. There is a plan for the crown roofs. What it shows is all the, I don't know if you can see this, all the yellow buildings around where the red dot is. The red dot is a site, and they're all the buildings that have crown roofs. A large proportion of these buildings surrounding the site, I think I counted about 19 within sort of throwing distance, all contain crown roofs. It's the way things are going here. You know, to get to 2.5 stories in these properties, and without the crown roof, they go right up in the sky. It's important. I think the 58,000 is guaranteed money into the borough. I do like the sustainability and the sort of carbon neutral, you know, ongoing costs. Electric bills are going through the roof, and same with the gas. So that the energy side is important. And we haven't got the 5-year house and land supply. 8 dwellings. I mean, if we think about it here, you know, Sunningdale is a nice part of the world. But the borough local plan is a holistic plan for the whole borough. We have an acute housing shortage in this borough. In this country, we've got 140,000 children at the moment in temporary accommodation. In this borough, we have hundreds of people, families in temporary accommodation. If we can get some of them into housing, there is a housing shortage. And I'm not saying this is going to be used for temporary accommodation, but it does free up other houses around the borough. People who generally tend to move and live locally. So for these reasons, I'm very supportive of it. I like the fact that it's got plenty of parking on site. The applicant and the officers have engaged heavily, I can see, and have made changes to satisfy as much as possible the parish. And also, number 9 was another concern. I was looking at number 9 and at the closeness of that property, plot number 4 and 5. I noticed the house that is about 22 meters away. The one that was at height. There's no windows on the side of that building at all. Not a single window, which is, it does respect the privacy somewhat. There is harm. I do see there's harm, but what we do have to think about is also housing future generations. So, you know, for all of these reasons, I am leaning very much in favour of proposing this development. Thank you.
Councillor Julian.
Thank you. I concur with much of what's been said. Really, I think that Chair, you said that actually, if this were in a flat balance, then actually we possibly maybe be leaning towards approval anyway. And I sort of concur with that. I think that if we, sorry, Claire, can you bring up the balance thing again? I think that the key harms that I see, as well as, yes, there's the harm to tree, but actually it looks like it's more one than the other. The one at the road looks like that's the harm. So yes, there is harm. The other thing, which isn't there or isn't, I think, brought out as much on the right-hand side, is the fact that this was allocated for 10 and it doesn't provide that. We're short, albeit we're only one short. And actually there's a sort of arguably a benefit to retaining the big White House for other reasons, rather than almost tick the box, take it down and put 2 small houses which would do that. So I think there is clearly harm. I think the worries that I had, I'm actually satisfied broadly. So on the widening lane before completion, it looks like we conditioned there, and there's the condition in the update. The flooding side, I think that's good. We're happy that that's satisfied. Scale, one comment I just did SPA. Once again, I'm sorry that I just cannot agree with their commentary. It looks very, very similar to. It's in keeping with the area. It just is. I think on the affordable housing, it doesn't provide the right mix. No, but on the other hand, we have the contribution and the SPA. I think I'm sort of happy that that's also similarly been met by a legal agreement. So without further ado, let's just throw this in there that I would propose that we go with officer recommendations to grant planning permission on the satisfactory completion of what we're going to say the legal section 106 legal agreement to secure the infrastructure in section 10 with the conditions, plus the condition that officers will write about the refuse storage thing. So that's my proposal.
Did you get all that, Lawrence? I think. Yeah. It's in line with the officer's recommendations for the satisfactory completion of the legal agreements. Agreed. And of course, number 2 is in there to refuse if an undertaking's not been entered into within 6 months. And the additional condition of the outline for the refuse storage, particularly for the flats, prior to granting. Do we have anybody else wants to speak, wants to debate? That's fine. Or Councillor Calendar.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to comment that I do like that the developers seem to have made efforts to work with the comments and objections that have been made. I think the condition that the road widening is unsafe before anything else is done, and that there's provision of pavements to make that safe for the people that are already living there is really significant. And looking at the differences from the previous plans to this one, I think there have been efforts made to sort of break up plots. One was just to break up the sort of appearance, make them look less sort of less there. And I think the sort of net carbon zero thing is obviously as we discussed is operational carbon rather than sort of embodied carbon. But it is a good thing because there are lots of houses, lots of developments still going up that are not remotely not operationally carbon, and that's zero, so that's good. And retaining the existing building, the existing property is a really good thing on that front, which I really welcome. And I think efforts, a lot of efforts have been made. I think because it's an allocated site, we already talked about the trees and the things that were, that were going to happen. I think on balance, I would be inclined to support the recommendation to approve it. So, unless anyone's got any other sort of comment, then I'm going to second the proposal.
Okay. Yeah, some others.
Thank you, Chair. I guess just to add a bit more thinking that I've been doing. If I look at it and if I sort of think, okay, how would I get 10 10 units on there, would it be a sort of combination of possibly sort of 3-bed semis or a terrace or something like that? That then starts to be quite out of keeping with the neighbourhood. So it actually feels like, on reflection, it's walking a bit of a tightrope around the sort of the previous refusal or the various regulations. But I think it seems like it's a reasonable development for the space. Yeah, I appreciate the sort of the flexes that the developer has done. There is the flats there, which is a good feature. And with the various conditions we've talked about, that improves it as well. So yeah.
So at the moment we have one proposition, which is one motion to accept officers' recommendations, as we said. Do we have a seconder for that? You don't need a second. We have a seconder then. Do you have anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor?
No, I just wanted to confirm that the condition of widening of the pathway was definitely going to be blocked along with the refuge one. That is coming from the neighbourhood plan, the council, the parish council as well.
It was explained, I think, that
Yeah.
it was done before the occupation.
That's correct.
But also that highways have also specified it's a different thing before the site. It moves into a different
But I
site.
just wanted to just make sure it is definitely whatever we have spoken is of.
As it is. Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Councillor Gertson.
Thank you. Now, I was just talking about I was thinking about the units and how many units, and sort of, I think we get hung up on numbers quite a lot, don't we? Think, I think, could it be 10 units, so we can max out the local plan. But when you look at this, I was talking to someone the other day about these sort of larger family homes and sort of the multi-generational living. And it's quite interesting sort of listen to this conversation where, there's sort of like 3 families in the same house, and where it was the younger members were obviously the children were being looked after by the older members, and it was almost like the grandparents were looking after the kids, and then when the grandparents were older, the children were looking after the grandparents, and it was sort of like a sort of 3 families in one, and it sort of solved so many issues. I thought, wow, that was really interesting. But I don't know if that's going to be the setup here, but you could potentially house, 10 families in that site, by the time it finishes. So yeah, I'm in favour of this. I think it's a good thing. Thank you.
If we've all finished debating, we have only one motion proposed, which is to accept the officer's recommendations, with the 2 conditions there, 2 recommendations, and also with the additional condition that were agreed. If there is no other debate, we can move to a name vote, I believe. Archie, if you'd like to confirm the wording before we move into this.
Yeah, sure thing, Chair. Just confirming the wording. So the proposal on the table is to grant permissions subject to the conditions detailed in the committee report and update the report, and subject to the completion of a satisfactory section S106 planning obligation to secure infrastructure detailed in section 10 of the committee report. With the added condition to require details of refuse storage. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. So we've got updating the wording to be the section 106 legal agreement, noting the additional condition in the update sheet about the widening to take place for construction traffic, and then an additional condition with details of refuse storage to be submitted. Agreed.
Okay, we were satisfied as the proposal. Okay, up again.
Okay, motion on the table, as mentioned by Adrian, was proposed by Councillor Junior Teasy and seconded by Councillor Karen Davies. This motion is in line. This motion is in line with officer recommendation. I'll now take a name vote. Please say clearly if you're for, against, or abstain from the motion. So, Councillor Karen Davies.
For.
Councillor Knowles.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
For.
Councillor Singh.
For.
Councillor Teasy.
For.
And Councillor Wilson.
For.
That's unanimously approved. The motion passes.
Thank you very much indeed, officers and councillors. As this is a kind of a brought forward meeting, there are no other agenda items for this morning. The meeting is therefore closed. Thank you very much for the public for attending and for everybody's time. Have a nice